Hello, I'm Faye Waterman, the Conversation Curator. And today on my podcast, What's Your Superpower? I have Chiara Barbera, who is the Director and CEO of Experience Assaggio. And this is Italian cooking. Now I'm going to ask Chiara, what is her superpower? But firstly, welcome, Chiara.
Thank you, Faye. It's wonderful to be here. I'm actually also very excited to add that we've gone beyond cooking now in Assaggio, so it's all about capturing traditions and celebrating Nonni. So we've also got, in addition to cooking, we've also got gardening and pastimes as well are our two latest categories. So yes, it's very exciting. It's growing. And thank you for having me on today's show. I'm very excited to be here.
Perfect. Now, Chiara, what do you think your superpower is, or what do you think other people see you as having a superpower? What is it?
I would say my superpower is connecting with Nonni, with grandparents, specifically Italian. I think also exploring, and I think we can delve into that a little bit later. But I think my curiosity and my tendency to always want to explore, I think that really connects me to grandparents of Italian descent, specifically, or Italian grandparents in Italy, because I just love listening to like their stories. I grew up with four grandparents, and I think they shared all of their knowledge. And I think as I got older, I just developed this curiosity of where they came from and the culture that they kind of instilled in me. And I think as a result of that, I think every time I meet a grandparent, I'm like, oh, like this person must have a fascinating story. Like, tell me about that. Like, I want to hear all about it. So yeah, I would say that's my superpower.
Your superpower is the curiosity to find out more about your Italian heritage and tradition, and to share that with the world, not just with your own culture, but share that experience with the world so that they can enjoy what you do. And I mean, the Italians, they don't just cook a meal, they cook the meal, they sit around the table, they have conversation, the meal's finished, or maybe the food's gone, most of the time not, but they continue that conversation. So it's bringing people around the table to reconnect, because we've lost that here in Australia. Everyone is so busy, and they might sit for 5 minutes and eat their meal, and then they get up and they go and do whatever. But with Italians, they make the meal last for hours, and it's a pleasure and an enjoyment. So with your superpower, you bring out that energy, you bring out that experience, that curiosity for other people to want to experience it. And how blessed are you to have grown up with four grandparents and nonnas that are willing to stand there while you record them and share their magic of cooking?
I think I'm incredibly blessed, but I think you really touched on something, Faye, that I didn't even realize before coming to this conversation. But I think you're right. Like, I think my superpower is being able to share that as well. And I think that's something that I've noticed, like in my travels and just even talking to people. I love being able to share the experience that I've gone through, and that's all about like love and connecting with people. And I think my favorite part about my nonnas, so because I lost my grandfathers when I was young, and ever since then I've been making friends with lots of grandfathers, Italian grandfathers that that I meet. And I think one of the things that I love the most about going to my nonna's house, and one of the reasons I connect most with grandparents, nonni, is I think it's just you show up, and that's all they want. They just want you to be there, and it doesn't matter who you are, what you do. Just the fact that you're sitting there and you're giving them 5 minutes of your time, could be more, could be less. They're just so grateful and so appreciative, and there's nothing else. It's incomplicated. It's just, oh, thanks so much for coming over. I'm so glad that you're here. Like, oh, you want to listen to my story? I'd love to tell you about my story. And I think I really get like, it fills my heart learning about their stories and seeing them so excited to be able to share their stories as well. And I think one of the things just comes down to the fact that our basic human instinct is we want to all be seen. And I think at that age, I've noticed with my nonnas, I think sometimes the risk is that we think, oh, they're old, they're stuck in their ways, they don't know anything. I can't, the world has changed, I can't learn anything from them. And I think that's the biggest mistake we could ever make, because what they've gone through in their lives is phenomenal. None of us could ever comprehend what they've been through. And I think being able to sit down and listen to them, and they're just so willing to extend their love and their stories and share, and I think it's the most beautiful thing ever. So being able to experience that is the biggest blessing that I've ever received. And I think I guess my superpower, I hope, is being able to share that as much as I possibly can.
I think what you've just done there is bring joy to my heart, because there's lots of things there that you've said, like recognizing the older community, your family, recognizing people who think they're obsolete and nobody cares about them. It's important that we all as humans connect and share that empathy and that joy and that pleasure with people. And all people really want is to be recognized, as you said, and to be seen for who they are, not for what others want to see, expect them to be, but to be seen as who they actually are. And that's what your nonnas do for you. And they, just from what you were saying, they give you the pleasure and the joy of living life every day and having that excitement of going, seeing them and bringing a smile to their face, even if it's only for 5 minutes. What more can you ask for in life? You can have all the material things, you can have all the money in the world, but you can't have what you're sharing with the world, that experience.
It's pretty magic.
I'd say it has to be, and I'm sorry, bloody magical.
And you know what,
Absolutely.
Faye? I think the most beautiful thing that I've observed is, although that they're my nonnas and they're a little bit biased, and of course they're gonna welcome me with open arms. I've noticed that whenever I bring someone over, or whenever they see someone, they do the exact same thing to everyone, and I think that's so beautiful, because I think sometimes as well, in our busy society, we do just kind of keep walking. And I think one of the things that it baffles me is that when you go for a walk and you cross another human being and you don't even acknowledge each other. Like, I usually always try and say hello, but like not even a smile. I just think it's so bizarre. Whereas like they are so opposite. Like they will just embrace them. Yesterday I had someone come over, a journalist for one of the Italian newspapers here in Australia, and she came over for coffee because she wanted to talk to my nonnas and hear about what's been happening with Assaggio. And they were just so cute. Like they just embraced her, and she was like, oh, what a beautiful girl. And like they just make everyone feel so special. And I think as we take the time to spend time with them and see them, they see us, and it's just in a way that you're just like, wow, like it fills you up, it fills up your cup.
I want my cup filled with their joy. I'm coming. I'm inviting myself to come to your nonna's house and sit down around the table and enjoy a meal they've cooked. I
We would love to have you,
absolutely.
Kate. I think the beauty is with Assaggio, and this is one of the things, one of the reasons that I got into it is because I really feared that I would lose all of the traditions and all of the memories of my grandparents when they're no longer here. And I thought, well, this is a great way to capture them, and it's also a good excuse for me to be able to branch out to other grandparents and other Italian grandparents and capture their traditions and their experiences as well. But I think since I started, I remember one of the first quotes I read was about it was lots of famous people, and they were talking about all like really big names, and they were saying, when you do what you love, others will follow along and experience that same love that you're giving it. And I think that's when I was like, well, I love hanging out with my nonni. I love cooking with them. I love doing all sorts of things and learning from them. So I said, well, why not capture that and share that with other people? And I think the unique thing about Assaggio is it really is an experience. It's not just an online cooking class or, a gardening tips and tricks blog. It's something that really is an experience. And I always say, it's something that you have to put in your calendar. You have to say, okay, this Saturday, I'm going to just dedicate the whole morning, or this Sunday afternoon, I'm going to just dedicate the whole afternoon. And you kind of make an appointment with yourself to really enjoy it and kind of get immersed and carried away in everything that we do. And when I've been editing the videos, I've laughed, I've looked at it, and I've had those warm, fuzzy moments. And I think the beauty of it being an experience is that I can capture that kind of emotion, and I can capture the dynamic between us. And it's a really kind of, intimate, like up close and personal experience with me and my nonnas and the other nonni that are grandparents that are around me. And I think it's a beautiful way to be able to capture that, but then also share it with other people. So it's one of those things that's timeless. Like, we'll always have that, and people will always be able to experience it as well.
Experience it. And while you were speaking there, I was thinking there'd also be that joy, but there'd be the tears of joy from, when you're editing the videos, and which is all the hard work, the other parts, all the fun and the laughter and everything like that. But the joy that it gives you to be able to have those memories, and you will inspire others to want to do that in their cultures, other cultures as well, I hope, because it's important that we remember our own culture. And Australia is such a young country. What cultures do we have? We have the Indigenous culture. That should be captured. It's all about sharing and caring and the kindness, being kind to each other. It's not about I can do better than you, or this is better than what you did, etc., etc. It's about being kind, sharing and caring, and enjoying the moment.
Yes, definitely. And it's funny about the sharing part, because in Italian culture, and I'm sure it's similar in other cultures, recipes are often trade secrets. Like, you can't tell anyone your family recipes because it's like in the vault, and there's a little bit of competitiveness. Like, they're like, oh, I'm not going to give you my recipe, you might make it better than I do. So one of the questions I got early on when I started this was, like, why are you charging it? Why don't you just do it for free? And I said to them, I said, you know what? I said, I could definitely do it for free, but I said, these aren't my stories, these aren't my traditions. And I think if you don't put a value on that, and monetary value, people don't give it the worth that it deserves. And my all of the grandparents, all of the nonni that are involved so far, they've all shared beautiful stories as we've gone along. And I'm kind of like their little annoying shadow, because I'm like, oh, like, how did you do that? Why do you do that? When did you do that? When was the first time you did it? And some of them always laugh. They're like, I don't remember. Chiara, I don't know why we do it. We just do it like that. So it's funny. And I think the message that I keep trying to reinforce to everyone is that, of course we can do this for free, but the point is that it's not going to continue if you do it for free, because you need to, if you believe in something, you need to sustain it. And the only way to sustain that in this day and age is with money, unfortunately. So, or fortunately, whichever way you look at it. So I think the kind of the thing that I always say to them is, these aren't my things to give away for free. I'm very privileged and blessed that my nonni that I've involved so far have been so willing to do it. And I will admit, some of them have been a bit like, oh, I don't know about that. And then I show them, and then they're like, oh, okay, yeah, no, I'm comfortable with that. So I think the whole point is like, it's not something that you can just give away. And I think by putting a monetary value on it, it kind of reinforces the fact that, these aren't mine. These are kind of, I have a privilege to be able to share them, and I want other people to also recognize that there's a value to it as well. And it also keeps it going, and it keeps helping to expand more recipes, more traditions, more nonni. So yeah.
And I think that's so true. I mean, we do tend to put a value on things we get for free. If we pay for it, we value it more than what we do if it's just given to us. And I think traditions and cultures and your nonnas and their stories are very valuable, not just to them, but the family, the generations to come. you know, it's a legacy. It's passing on that legacy to the next generation, and the next generation adding to that and passing that on to the next. And that's what it's all about. It's about when you share a story of somebody's life, starting from when they were young, and they share that story right through up until where they are now, the value and the joy. And sometimes, you know, when you're talking to someone and they're sharing those stories, they don't recognize themselves as having that value until they actually think about it once they've said it, and you make a comment, and they then say, oh, well, I just thought it's just what you did. And it is just what you do at the time. But it's a tradition, and it's something that needs to be recorded and put somewhere so that the history is carried on through families. And that history not only adds to families, but it adds to the country, the culture, and everything else. So your experiencing Assaggio is magical. Your superpower is, I see your superpower as being a couple of things, and it's that willingness, that curiosity to want to take that information, that knowledge, those skills, the wisdom of your nonnas, and passing on that tradition so the whole world can experience it.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Faye. It's such a brilliant point that you raised about the culture as well, because I really thought about that, and I thought, well, if we don't have our nonni anymore, and they don't do the traditions that you used to do, come una volta, we say, which means once upon a time, it actually dilutes the culture, because all of the stereotypical Italian things that people have in their minds and that you see, you know, in movies and all that kind of stuff, that's my nonni's generation. Like, that's what they do. So the other thing, I was like, well, if we don't capture these, like, what's going to happen to the culture? It will be diluted. It won't be, you know, as strong and as proud as they are. And I think the uniqueness of, you know, me growing up in Australia and living in Australia is that these traditions and the culture has kind of been preserved in a little time capsule. And I think it's been heightened and strengthened even more, because that was all they had. They only had their traditions and their kind of culture that they knew, and they kind of like put that in a little bubble, and they really kind of fed it and grew it and made sure that that was kind of what tied us back to their roots. And then in consequence, that's also become our roots as well, because when I go there, and I think it's also because I'm the oldest grandchild on both sides, so I had the most nonni time out of all of my cousins. And I think when I go there, I'm like, oh wow, like, okay, like, I understand, like, I really do feel that that's where my roots are, purely because there's been that kind of explosion of culture in such a small kind of bubble. And I think the difference between, you know, Australian culture and our culture, I think that makes it even more heightened, because you're like, oh my gosh, this is so different. So then when you find yourself in a place where they do the same things and it is the same culture, you kind of feel a little bit more at home. So I think that also kind of fostered my ability to kind of look at it from an outsider's perspective, but also have that kind of insider's insight as well.
And it's bringing people together, and I think that's what's needed now in every culture and every country, is bringing people together and sharing and caring and showing a kindness that hasn't been shown for a long time, because everyone's so busy. They're wrapped up in their own little worlds, and they forget traditions until they're lost. And you can't get them back once they're lost. So carrying on that tradition, it doesn't matter whose tradition it is, someone somewhere is going to appreciate it. And when they stumble upon it, and they may stumble upon it, then they will go, wow, and embrace it. And that's what life is all about, embracing tradition, embracing kindness and the love of life. Embrace the love of life. We have one life. We have what we are in right now, the present moment, and that's all we have. The future is in the past. The past is in the past, and the future, we have no idea what it will bring. So the present moment, the experience of Assaggio right now, which we are going to experience via cooking session together. I'm looking forward to that, and I'm not saying any more, but you will see it. And understanding that bring families together, bring them back together instead of segregating, and, you know, everyone is very busy. That's all I can say. I think families need to come together on a regular basis to embrace what they have and what's kind of being lost along the way.
But even simply like loved ones, like, you know, even if it's like, you know, your friends, like you want to treat them to like a nice dinner, or you want to do something a little bit fun. Like I got my girlfriends together and I said, you know, we were all catching up, and I said, well, how about we do an Assaggio experience instead of, you know, just sitting down and talking, or, you know, just getting takeaway or whatever we normally do when we all get together. And, you know, and that, like, it's just something that's a little bit different as well, as something that's, you know, something that unites people and brings that whole kind of like preparation, and then you eat it together, and there's like a whole other satisfaction to it as well. It's pretty awesome. And like going back to your point about, you know, having them being lost as well, but when it's too late, there's nothing you can do. There was a friend of mine, and him and his partner are from Italy. They're here now in Australia, and his background is Sicilian. So when he found out what I was doing, he was super excited because his grandparents are also Sicilian. And he said to me, he's like, I wish I knew you sooner, because my nonna made these biscuits, and everyone I know have tried to make these biscuits, but none of them have been able to make them like my nonna. And we don't know what she did, but we just can't, never turns out how she made them. We follow the recipe, we do all of that, but it's never the same. And it was funny because I said, well, that's exactly why I'm doing videos, because, you know, it's never the same. And when you actually record them doing it, you're like, that's what they did. Like, that's their little like hand of it. You know, that's how they do that thing, or that's how much salt they put in, that's how much olive oil. So I think it's a good way to be able to not regret, you know, missing out on those recipes. But, you know, we might not appreciate it as much now, but I know that, you know, in future, I don't even want to think about it, but when they're no longer with us, at least that way we'll always have that, you know, that recipe or that memory, and be like, that's how a nonna made that, and we can always remember that.
It's the joy, the memory, yes. The joy.
Yeah. And even like the kindness part. So like there's a recipe on Experience Assaggio, and it's savoiardi, and it's like the I think they're called sponge biscuits. You know, the ones that you use to make tiramisu?
Oh yes.
Yeah. So my nonna makes them like just as normal biscuits, and they come out a little bit different to the ones that you buy in the shop, obviously, but they're so amazing. They're just like a simple kind of biscuit, and obviously we use it to make tiramisu sometimes as well, but even just like in a nice cup of coffee over morning, it's just beautiful. So in her introduction video, Nonna Lena, she talks about how her whole life it's always about, you know, being generous and being kind, and she makes these biscuits and she gives them to her neighbors. She has these like her little Tupperware containers with alfoil, and she wraps up her little biscuits in them, and every time she bakes, she loves to bake, she always is just giving people and giving and giving and giving. And I think it's beautiful to be able to share that, because then my hope is then people will watch that and go, I want to do that as well. Like, I'm going to start baking and giving it to my neighbor, or, you know, giving it to my loved ones.
So, Chiara, your superpower is what?
Wow, I feel like we've covered it so much. I think my superpower is that kind of the ability to really immerse myself in the culture, and in the same time sharing that experience that I cherish with other people, and showing them the magic of connecting with the older generations. Do you think that sums it up okay? Connection.
Yep. Connection.
Yes, I love that.
Bringing people together and reconnecting. So connection, the joy and the love of such a beautiful experience, and food brings people together. Thank you, Chiara, for such a wonderful conversation, and looking at and experiencing the joy of your nonnas, your culture, the culture that we can all share in, and the love that you portray for your nonnas and portray for your culture is just wonderful. So thank you.
Faye, thank you. It's always such an absolute pleasure chatting with you and conversing with you. So thank you. And I wish you all the best for this podcast. It's amazing what you're doing.
Thank you. I'm Faye Waterman, and this has been What's Your Superpower, the podcast. And I'll be back. Bye for now.